rather than waiting the government to distribute the wealth. That's why government will be blamed for everything, because we don't use the word share. We use the word deliver. That is the first point I want to make. The second one is all people shall have the equal rights to trade where they choose to manufacture and enter in all trades, crafts, and professions. In 1975, when I started mining, a black person, black in general, was not allowed to have a blasting certificate, and therefore they couldn't exercise any of the trades in mining. That has changed, and I think we should quantify progress we've made since that was open, because if we don't quantify it, we will be sitting as victims when we're making progress and not quantify the progress we're making. And trading, I still want to see more of our people. COVID-19 has created a new debate, which is very important. The question of developing our manufacturing capacity instead of importing. And I think that debate of developing the manufacturing capacity is very important in the sense that we must help our people manufacture things, trade, and sell to other people rather than hoping to get masks, import them from China and everywhere else, when our people can actually knit and sew masks and sell them all over the country and trade and begin to be business people. I always tell people when I talk about this that something that looks very small can be an international brand. There's various brands of coffee where people just sell coffee and become international brand of coffee. Let me go to mining. Hardly do we hear in ANC a discussion about the Mineral Petroleum and Development Act of 2002, where the mineral wealth below the surface of the soil was transferred to the state on behalf of the people as a whole. That's what the law says. And that was a collective effort of a COSATU union and the deployees of the ANC in government. And that gave us that right. But whether we are using that right or not is another issue. For example, if you are a private individual, you are mining, you apply for a license, the owner, the state, gives you the license. And when you mine, the owner charges you a royalty. We never had that discussion. And that royalty contributes on average between 8 and 10 billion rand per annum to the revenue of the country. But we never have that discussion and understand those nitty-gritties. As a result, we are almost pretending to be victims where we have space to do more things. We have a mining company, communities. I'm going to stop, 3 minutes, it's very short. We're having a mining company of the state. One day, the ANC must actually summon its employees to account about the progress made in building that company. Banks, we talked about State Bank. We've been talking about that for years. We even said, for a start, let's give a commercial license to the Post Bank. It's not happening. That is the responsibility of the ANC to make its employees account. Thank you, communities. I would have loved to talk more on these issues.
And we would have loved to hear more, Comrade. Maybe we'll have a separate webinar just with yourself, one-on-one, you and the whole country. Can I now call Comrade Beki Mtolo from KZN? Comrade Beki?
No, thanks very much, DSG. Greetings to...
Hello, Dr. Mtolo. Hello, Dr. Mtolo.
Thanks, National Chair. I was glad when you know that 3 minutes is short as a National Chair. Greeting to the leadership of the ANC. I think the National Chair has covered a lot of ground. I think the clause came as a result of various laws that colonialist and apartheid state introduced, totally excluded the indigenous people and black people in general from the participation of the economy, including to access certain level of skills that they can participate in the economy. Now, from 1994 up to date, we've tried, but the truth remains, the economy has not been tempered. It's still in the hands of the white minority, predominantly controlled by males in all forms of the economy. I think we are, in terms of the COVID-19 now, when one analyzes that the conditions, both domestically and globally, are in favor of the fundamental paradigm shift, I think the ANC has got a time, a condition favorable to it that we like between 2004 and 2009, which of course, for whatever reason, we wasted that opportunity. I think now we are given a space where we can't waste that opportunity again. For example, because the issue of the majority being not participating in the economy, it gives produce other factors that are uncontrollable, both in society and in the ANC as a ruling party. For example, in South Africa, for you to be a better person, to strive and live your own for your own potential, for you to do that, you must have some certain relationship with the state, either do business with the state or be employed in the state. Other than that, there are very few people who strive, who are not doing, who has no connection with the state, because the private sector is so closed in terms of employing people that are black people, also in terms of giving them opportunities. I think we ought to move with faster space to make sure that we transform the economy. But I think as the ANC, there are things that we must discuss and be honest to ourselves. Because if we don't discuss those things and we're afraid to confront them, as difficult as they may be, is that one of the things is that we must create legitimacy as the ANC and the democratic state led by the ANC, that we can be trusted that when we intervene in the economy, certain industries, we can be trusted that we can lead a better institutions. For example, when we meet with various people in the intelligentsia, for example, they will ask you, guys, you want to open a state bank, but here in KZN, you can't manage Itala Bank. You collapse it. You can't manage a land bank, you collapse it, and everything you touch becomes red. State-owned enterprises, issues of maladministration, issues of corruption. I think there is a need now in the ANC that let's confront issues and make sure that we become a legitimate state in terms of our conduct. Because there's a saying that says, DSG, never mind the message, but what about the messenger? The message can be good, but if it's carried by a wrong messenger, it may not be listened. Thank you very much.
Comrade Nomvula, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Comrade DSG. Good afternoon, comrades, leadership, and everybody who's watching. We're now going to proceed as it has been indicated that we have different provinces responding to different clauses. We shall now take the other clauses and speakers, one after the other, and we still appeal to comrades that you kindly stick to your 3 minutes, to your 3-minute rule. And in this instance, I'm going to invite Comrade Rudolph Pala from Limpopo, who will then be making an observation on the clause that speaks about equality before the law, that all shall be equal before the law. Comrade Rudolph Pala.
Thanks very much, moderator and the DSG. The clause, all shall be equal before the law, is a cornerstone of the Freedom Charter, because the system of white minority rule was based on law that was being passed by white parliament. Law was used to enforce segregation and the suppression of black people in general and Africans in particular. A white minority rule wanted to control every facet of life, from where people could stay to who people could marry. The clause was destined to build a future of equal society that is non-racial, non-sexist, united, democratic, and a prosperous society. The principle of equality before the law is a fundamental human right that was denied to our people, and the clause sought to end that. The clause was an elaboration of the principal declaration in the Freedom Charter, as found in the preamble of the Charter itself, that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, and that no government can justly claim authority unless it is based on the will of the people. The implementation of this clause realizes the declarations that are made in the, particularly the preamble of the Freedom Charter itself. Today we have 26 years building an egalitarian society, but the building of a human society is unlike the construction of a house. It requires continuous improvement, redesign, further improvements. As new challenges emerge, you respond to them and do further improvements on the work that you are doing. Today, equality is a cornerstone of the new democratic dispensation that we have. Courts of law and the legal system are open to all the people of our country. The Bill of Rights in our constitution articulates the equality of everyone before the law. Discrimination on the basis of race, color, belief, creed, religion is disallowed, and it's not allowed in terms of the constitution. In practice, there is a distance between the rights as enshrined in the constitution and other law, and the reality that is lived by a majority of South Africans, particularly the black people in general and Africans in particular. Particularly because the commanding heights of the economy of our country are still in white hands. Land, banks, farms, huge industries, mines, and others are still predominantly in the hands of a white minority. 26 years of ANC rule. It is the task of the National Democratic Revolution, to ensure that finally blacks in general and Africans in particular get into these areas, and equality before the law is not just in the constitution and in the Bill of Rights and in the legislation, but is a felt practical experience of ordinary people on a day-to-day basis, particularly the people who the struggle was about, the black people in general and Africans in particular, a majority of whom still find that the courts are not as open as they ought to be. Because even when you go to court today, it depends on how deep your pockets are, the extent to which you can be able to access higher courts, the higher you go. So to that extent, while we have in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution equality before the law, the practice, the lived practice of the overwhelming majority of our people is a different kettle of fish. I thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you very much, Comrade Rudolph. Comrades, before we move to the other clauses on human rights, I would wish to take us back to one of our critical clauses, the clause that says the land shall be shared amongst those who worked it. This clause in 1955 was presented by Delegate T.E. Chungwana. Today, the provinces of the Northern Cape and the Eastern Cape are going to lead the charge on this clause. And I call therefore on Comrade Xolile Nqatha, as well as the comrade from the Northern Cape, who will also make a presentation on this particular clause. Can we start with Comrade from the Eastern Cape, and then the next one will follow without me introducing.
Okay, thank you, Comrade Nomvula, and greetings to you and the leadership and the rest of the comrades. Thanks for giving the Provincial Executive Committee this opportunity. Indeed, Comrade Chair, this crisis of COVID-19 has ushered in a political movement, a rare opportunity for a generation. Political movements do not announce themselves to the leadership to say, here we are a political movement, the leadership must seize that. So it is an art of leadership to seize a political movement. We want as a province to welcome and agree fully with the president to say this period requires extraordinary measures. We equally agree with the president that we need a new economy. We are arguing that that economy cannot be realized outside, ensuring that land is shared among those who work it. That is why we view this clause as quite very critical, and that there needs to be an acceleration of land distribution, that the land must be available for building this new economy, which must essentially be a people's economy, not any new economy, that it must benefit the majority of workers and the poor, and that there must be land use must be available for various uses, including land for human settlement, land for food production, land for livestock, land for recreational facilities. And that as we deal with this question of land, as we build this new people's economy, we must ask critical questions. Land for who and for what? That is why I've highlighted various land uses above. The land for who, which means which class? Because we might know that over the years and various analysts, including the University of Western Cape, plus, they have arrived in their research to the analysis that over the years, increasingly land has been benefiting elites, including our own BAE. In other shameful instances is where land has been hijacked by elites, taken away from beneficiaries of land reform. And therefore, we're saying that it's important that we must build this to be a people's economy. Whereas we in the Eastern Cape, not less than 9 frontier wars were fought against land dispossession. And it is here where we feel the brunt of this land dispossession. It is here where we feel the brunt of a migrant labor system, which has destroyed the family structure, family units over the time, with serious implications. Implications for women, they are suffering, for women, for children, they are suffering as well. That is why, Comrade Chair, we're saying that as we have observed now over this period, we're getting deeper now into the 6th decade of freedom. But the triple challenges of unemployment and inequality are remaining stubborn. We're arguing in the province that it is so because our economy remains in the same neoliberal economic policy framework, and therefore it reproduces these inequalities that we see. And we're arguing that we cannot distribute land as part of building this new economy unless we change this neoliberal policy framework and launch our policy path into a path that ensures that the economy and the land benefits the majority. We will fully agree, Comrade Chair, that unless we take decisive steps, once we're arguing all these things, the changes that we are arguing, we're seeing, whether the rating agencies and all of them breathing over our necks. But this period, as we're saying, that it is a critical moment. It is a critical moment for us to take these steps. It's a political moment, an opportunity for leadership that possible will never come again. And we're arguing that we will only defeat poverty and unemployment only if land is shared among those who work it, Comrade Nomvula. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Ngata. Comrades, let's welcome Comrade President Cyril Ramaphosa, who has joined us. Welcome, Comrade President, and we're looking forward to your own remarks on behalf of the African National Congress. And we will then invite Comrade Marupin Likwene from the Northern Cape. Comrade Marupin.
Thank you very much, Comrade Nomvola. Let me also take this opportunity to greet the entire leadership, the President, and all of us bearers, NEC members, PC members, and comrades. Thank you very much for the opportunity as Northern Cape Province to present the fourth pillar of the Freedom Charter. As we celebrate today the 65th anniversary of the Freedom Charter, we must thank those visionary leadership, our forebears, who had foresight, who crafted these 10 key pillars, which became a guiding a document for many decades. We all know, Comrade Novel, that the white minority regime passed the Land Act of 1913, which in essence, it was a policy designed to impoverish the Black African masses, to compel them to work forever for the white men, whether it's in mines, in factories, in farms, and they must become forever slaves, and they must own the commanding heights of the economy. Allow me to just quote what the Solplaik said in June the 20th, 1913. He said, awakening on Friday morning, June 20, 1913, the South African native found himself not actually slave, but a pariah in the land of his rebirth, in the land of his birth. So in any part of the world, the land question remains a harp around which the liberation of any nation revolves. The ANC in 1993, through its ready to govern policy document, which in 1994 subsequently became our policy framework, it asserted that in the next 5 years, from 94, in the next 5 years, 30% of the land shall be reallocated to the rightful owners of this country. But then from 94 to 99, we never achieved that percentage of the land which is supposed to be given back to its rightful owners. Currently, only 40% of the land is in the hand of the state, in the land of the state. Close to 78-79% is in private hands of white individuals, which are white males in particular. So we have not moved much as a country. 25 years, what the RTP said, in the first 5 years, we're far from even achieving that. But the 54th National Conference of Nazareth took an important resolution, which asserted that we must expropriate land without compensation. I think it took us a step further as a country, as a nation, even as a movement. I want to further reaffirm and support the recommendation from the final report of the Presidential Advisory Panel on Land Reform and Agriculture. It seeks to give impetus to what Nazareth Conference have resolved. And I think it's important as the NC. We must pay attention to the land question, because it remains a thorn in every nation, especially in our country, where we're dispossessed through various wars of resistance. And we did not just lose the land as the surface. We lost everything even beneath and even on top, including our livestock, our houses, our buildings, which were dispossessed from the African people of South Africa. And what's important for me, we need to ensure that we don't lose sight of this important matter. And as the ENC, we have been very clear in terms of how we must address the issue of racial question, so that we must affirm our people in terms of the economy, in terms of addressing the terrible challenges our country experiences. But also under the current legislation, I think we have made sufficient progress as the ANC-led government. We must acknowledge that, but we need to be more radical in taking this process forward. And even in Mangaung conference, we have resolved as the ANC that this period, it signifies a second radical phase of our transition in seeking to accelerate the creation of a national democratic society. And this type of society we're seeking to build, as long as the masses of our country does not own the economy, does not own the land, it will be a pipe dream. But currently with COVID-19 opportunities, COVID-19 is creating opportunities for us as a country in seeking to do things differently. And amongst them is a land question. We'll have to see as a movement and to check out then do we address this so that our people can produce their own food production under COVID-19, so that our people can create jobs and our people can toil the land, so that the land shall be shared amongst those who work. It becomes reality as a country and as a nation. And lastly,
thank you, Comrade Maruping. What we will appreciate is if you could share the notes and then we'll put it on the ANC website. Thank you very much. That was the Eastern Cape with the Northern Cape. We have already called upon Comrade Rudolph from Limpopo. The next presenter will be representing the Northwest Province, Bokone Bophirima, Ambassador Comrade Taki, Africa. And immediately after Comrade Taki, we will also have a comment and presentation made by the ANC Women's League. Over to you, Comrade Taki. Comrade Taki, Africa. Comrades, I seem not to get through to Comrade Taki.
May we go to the Women's League?
Thank you very much, GM. Can we then invite the Women's League to make a contribution in this regard? The ANC Women's League. I noticed that we have the young women's desk of the ANC Women's League, Comrade Julie Bia. Are you representing the ANC Women's League Young Women's Desk? If you could make a 3-minute remark, Comrade Julie.
Thank you, Comrade Moderator. I need to establish, I know that the convener is meant to speak on behalf of the desk. If I could just be given a few minutes.
Comrade Chair, may I suggest that we move to the next clause?
Okay, in that regard, then we'll move to the Mpumalanga province. Mpumalanga will contribute on the clause that says there shall be work and security. Comrade, the comrade representing Mpumalanga, if you could come in. Comrade Lindy, I saw you. Who's representing Mpumalanga?
Thank you very much. It's Comrade Fish Matlalela.
Yes, he is here. Comrade Fish.
No, thank you, Comrade Nomvula and the leadership of the ANC. We are given a topic dealing with the pillar that deals with there shall be work and security. Focuses on employment and job creations as well as skills revolution. Critical to this is to first indicate that, as you all know, that Stats SA has released a first quarter survey indicating that unemployment is growing in South Africa. And therefore, the relevance of the clause is unquestionable. In order to deal with the issue of unemployment, we need to make sure that job creation is central to our efforts to reduce poverty. What we need to do is to intensify our measures to improve the lives of the poor by making sure that we provide electricity, water, sanitation, and other services that some South Africans still do not have as we speak. In order to achieve the rate of employment creation that exceeds the growth in the number of people that are unemployed, means that our economy needs to grow at a faster pace. This requires that we need to fully implement measures that are outlined in our manifesto, election manifesto of 2019, where we develop a plan of which more focus on the manifesto was about creation of more jobs, decent jobs for our people, so that we're able to reduce unemployment and then deal with the issue of poverty. What we need to do is, in order to do this, key amongst them, those that are lifted in the manifesto that we need to tackle on, is the massive investment in infrastructure build program, by making sure that we build infrastructure, both the economic and the social infrastructure. We need to take necessary steps that begins to say how to improve the ease of doing business, as well as reduce the cost of doing business in the country. Secondly, we need to say how to unlock the potential of small businesses so that they're able, because small businesses have got the ability to create more jobs than any other business, and therefore we need to support it. Cooperatives, as well as how do we improve the village and the township economy, so that we're able to make sure that there is a lot of economic activities taking place in the villages and in the township. How do you promote key industries that has got a potential of labor absorbing, that is labor intensive? Key amongst them is your agriculture, your mining, your tourism, your manufacturing. In order to achieve all of this, we need to develop skills. And therefore, our TVET colleges must be able to produce the necessary skill that the economy requires. Economists are saying after since the national lockdown, we'll be expecting more unemployed people. And therefore, it requires us that how do we use this opportunity of the crisis that is developed in the country and in the world to then change the situation and make sure that we transform our economy. That must at the end benefit the entire society and the people of South Africa as a whole. As the president has indicated, how do we use this crisis as an opportunity that enables South Africans to deal with the challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality, and make the economy work for our people so that we're able to create the necessary decent employment and opportunities that our people need. Thank you very much.
Comrade Nomvula.
Comrade DSG, can you take over? We're at the clause, the doors of learning and culture.
Thank you very much, Comrade Phoebe. Comrades, thank you very much, Comrade Fish. That certainly was very insightful, short, but to the point. Thank you. We now call on comrades from the ANC Youth, from the Youth League, Comrade Fashia Hassan, and she will be followed by somebody from the PYA. Unfortunately, I did not get a name, but one will follow the other. Each have 3 minutes. Comrade Fashia.
Thanks, Comrade DSG. Just to acknowledge the leadership, I'm going to be covered on protocol because of time. We grew up hearing the words of the Freedom Charter, the doors of learning and culture shall be opened, and it made sense at the time. But when we got to university, we fast realized that in much as the Freedom Charter said or spoke of this, the reality on the ground was very different. In reality, the doors of learning were shut unless you could afford it, and unless you could afford the exorbitant fees at both university and a post-schooling space. Education was and is commodified. In fact, it was this clause in question that brought myself and many others to the PYA. And it was this call and clause that led to the call for free, quality, and decolonized education. The doors of learning shall be opened. That is what sparked the biggest social movement and mass mobilization of young people in a post-democratic era, what we now call as fees must fall. On the 14th of October 2015, and even before that, we took to the streets to realize this vision of the Freedom Charter. And in fact, it was this clause, the doors of learning shall be opened, that sparked some of our forms of protest in which we shut down the actual doors of learning until we got change. But this fight to open the doors of learning and culture goes beyond university. And we must ensure that even in our basic education system, there is more equitability, that we provide the basic needs and the necessary tools for our people to succeed. From removing all pit latrines in schools in favor of proper sewerage and plumbing systems, to having enough access to online learning in the current situation. But we must also transform the arts and culture sector so that our Black artists, particularly our young Black artists, can tell their stories and share them with the world without fear or pressure to whitewash the Black experience in favor of ratings and in funding. In commemorating these 65 years of the Freedom Charter, let us never forget there is still a great deal of work to do. And key to this fundamental change in society is to center youth voices, whether it be in regard to participation in the economy or raising the number of young people at the decision-making table. Ultimately, we have no other choice but to revive and rejuvenate our youth structures and the Youth League in particular. Amandla. Thank you, DSG.
Thank you. I see Comrade Nomvula is back. She might have been disconnected. But is there anyone from the PYA ready to make an input?
Yes, Comrade DSG, Atenkos Mabona, SASCO National Organizer.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thanks, DSG. Greetings to everyone in the meeting. The pandemic has created a crisis in higher education. Education that was always been in ivory towers, access to it with the AP score questions, with the TVET sector that is easily accessible to all Black students and Africans in general. But the very same TVET sector that we note as centers of learning, of people's centers of skills development and learning, are very much disadvantaged because they are reduced to mini universities in that they lack infrastructure development. If you can go to one of the nearest TVET sector, TVET college campuses, you'd find with no Wi-Fi as basic things for learning and teaching, with no infrastructure that enables engineering students to be more productive and more efficient. But the pandemic has also brought in a new concept of e-learning, the concept or a way that is very much exclusionary, and that if you are from the historically known Bantu stands with a lot of connectivity questions, you would not be able to access teaching and learning materials, in that you would be suffering first on questions of connectivity. Imagine someone from Tanin, Matatiel, Velcom in some parts or in other parts of the country that would also suffer on connectivity. But if you have connectivity, you would suffer with
with data and laptops, because you need data to access your videos that are posted and submit learning materials, assignments, and tests. So these were saying they are shutting down the doors of learning and culture, and are presenting a new challenge in higher education and post-schooling sector. I hope that I've not exhausted my 3 minutes, but also one thing that has been presented is inequality in the post-schooling sector, in that the historically disadvantaged institutions are left behind. They can't even provide their students with laptops and data, while the historically advantaged and predominantly white institutions are thriving. They give their students laptops, data, and so on. So these are challenges that continue to confront this question of access and success to post-schooling and training sector. And in our view as South African Student Congress, the doors of learning are being shut by day, and our movement is watching on the sidelines. Thanks, DSG.
Thank you very much to both Comrade Fascia and Comrade Iviwe. You've raised issues that certainly require deeper discussion and not just discussion, but action. And that's what you are talking about in particular, both of you. Same theme, different issues. We will now move to Comrade Tebogo Pedu from Gauteng province, and he's going to lead us on There Shall Be Houses, Security and Comfort. Comrade Tebogo.
It is Chilidzi.
He's been replaced by Comrade Chilidzi. Okay, you have 3 minutes, Comrade Chilidzi. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much, DSG. I think the first point, we need to understand that these clauses or these pillars are integrated and interdependent. And of course, with respect to these Freedom Charter pillars, they arises from since 1943, and that campaign has been taken forward through 1952, 1954, 55, and ANC has put the organization at the center in the hands of the people. With respect to this particular pillar, we need to indicate that since for the past 26 years ago, the ANC government had been building houses, but what we are concerned about going forward is the quality of houses. We know that the indication, right, the current outbreak has fundamentally really disrupted the development of new projects of houses because it brought unprecedented consequences, which we have seen since before, preceded by the Spanish flu 200 years ago. So in this context, DSG or moderator, housing, unused housing space shall be made available for the people. We find greatest appreciation for this pillar through the current land reform in Parliament. And of course, rent and prices shall be lowered. The intervention for government to make social housing seeks to respond to this particular pillar. Slums shall be demolished and new suburbs will be built, and where all transport, road lighting, and playing fields and creches and social centers. In this context, we still experience what we call apartheid spatial planning systems, which seeks to undermine the development, integrated development, where the housing as we speak, or RDP housing and social houses, are still being built at outward skirts, which does not away from the areas of employment, which undermined the integration and the racial integrations of our society. And other critical issues that we have observed is that we still have huge informal settlement. And I think applications of new technology, alternative building technology, can only help the ANC going forward to make sure that indeed we are able to build faster. Otherwise, we are still remaining to have a lot of land occupations, illegal occupation by the forces supposed to change. And I think other key issues that we see that the development of human settlement or it's not be seen as only houses, but integrated for roads, lighting, fields, other infrastructures that are able to be found, such as crashes and so on. In that context, DSG, we believe that we can make strive in this context. Lastly, under this pillar, it also says that they will need to be able to have access to healthcare for people, or free medical care and hospitalization. So the intervention of the National Health Insurance.
I'm sorry, comrade, your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Comrades, the 10th and last clause of the Freedom Charter is there shall be peace and friendship. And last night we focused on this clause as we concluded our solidarity event with the people of Palestine, who face the most oppressive regime in the world. Can you please all still remain mute? We now have a very distinguished panel of respondents who each have 3 minutes only, who will talk about what the Freedom Charter means to them in the light of what was said by the provincial delegations. I'm going to start with Maulana Bam, if he is with us. Maulana? Okay, let me move on until Maulana Bam is able to join us.
May I suggest that you take Comrade Steve?
Yes, I'm going to go on with the next person on my list, Comrade Phoebe, is Sibonile Mkize, Nkosi Sibonile Mkize. Could you please go ahead?
DSG, thank you very much for the opportunity, and greetings to all the comrades on here. I think I'd like to just basically take time to just thank the presentation that we've had. Just in short, as the chief of my area in Hlatikulu in Escort in KwaZulu-Natal, I think that all the pillars of the Freedom Charter are important, but I'm just going to touch on two that are basically very close to my heart. One of them is going to be education. The doors of learning and culture shall be open, and I think I'm going to concentrate more on the culture part. Culture, to me, is one thing that I think most importantly should be concentrated around language. And language in this particular instance is because I say language because language carries culture, language carries ideology, language carries mentality. And I think probably one of the most important things for us to do right now is to ensure that we start promoting our African languages. It is something that is already happening within some of the universities, and it is actually going in the process of actually decolonizing the way that universities are run. Every single student in every tertiary institution should be in a space where they are able to be taught and examined in a language of their mother tongue. And I think probably even more important, it's actually the sad part, and I think it was a congratulatory element where about 3 years ago, Rhodes University actually published their first PhD, which was done by a student, which was done totally in Xhosa. Now, as great as that was, DSG, the worst part about that is that the irony of it, that in this land that we are in, we are actually celebrating and actually going out of our way to showcase the fact that we are able to write in our own languages. And the one way that we need to be able to promote this is that government needs to also come in and change the way that we do this. Memos, advertisements, etc., need to be done in our indigenous languages so that you can actually promote them. An advert that I saw quite recently for a software engineer that came out from a US company, Amazon, was actually written in isiZulu, and it's something that we need to also start doing as well. To close off DSG so that I don't take much of the time, I would like also just to look at the land question. The land shall be shared amongst those who work it. Now, there is this insinuation that obviously chiefs and amakosi, horses all over KZN probably are in a situation where they are actually abusing their people that they are leading. Yes, there are some of us who may be doing this, and there are some of us who are actually doing to come in and assist our communities. I think one of the things that hurt us here in KwaZulu-Natal was the seeming attack by the high-level panel that was actually led by our former president, where there was an insinuation that they were going around to attack the Ingonyama Trust Board. It is not a perfect institution, but the biggest question about us, what we are looking at, was how is it that one of the things that they're concentrating on is to actually try and take the land away from the customary way of living. Now, there may be a lot of debates about it, but then at the heart of it, Comrade DSG, is the fact that there is this one element where we look at, which is called security of tenure. And security of tenure for most people is basically saying every single person should have a title deed. Now, I'm sitting here and also having a background in finance and economics, and I'm thinking to myself, is that the only way that we can provide security of tenure to all our rural people, and so that people can get access to land? And I'll sit here and probably be able to give a more elaborate explanation on what I would basically look at as security of tenure. But I'm scared at the fact that people that are pushing for some of our rural participants to have individual title deeds are mostly looking for them to get into credit, rather than to say, let us provide you with capital in order for you to actually be able to grow. I think for now, Comrade DSG, let me close off, but I think at the heart of it, the people that I lead, there has been some movement, but we can still do more. Thank you very much.
Unmute DSG.
Thank you very much, Nkosi Mkize. I'd like now to call on Zuleika Patel, a young student activist against racism. Zuleika? No. Okay, I think we haven't got Zuleika yet. I then will move on to
Comrade, I'm here.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much for this platform. First and foremost, I'd like to send my greetings to the President of the Republic. I hope that you are well and you are healthy in such trying times. And sorry, I'm not.
Zuleika, we can't hear you. Okay, Zuleika, will you keep trying to come? You muted yourself. Can you unmute?
Looks like there may be a connection problem. Shall we move to the next one?
Just a second, please. My next speaker is Comrade Steve Lesiki from the LGBTQI community. Comrade Steve.
Thank you so much, DSG. Thank you to the ANC for creating this platform, and greetings to the leadership and to comrades. Comrade DSG, you know, the Freedom Charter has promised freedom. And it is quite important where we recognize what freedom means. And in the case of LGBTI community, where we know that LGBTI people are everywhere in communities, in every society. However, LGBTI people, we need to recognize that they are our comrades, our friends, our colleagues, our children, our siblings, our acquaintances, and family members. A lot of LGBTI people, you know, are coming across many challenges in the quest of freedom in this case. A lot of people might claim that they have not met any single member of the LGBTI people or person, and it is more likely that people have indeed met people in their lives. But however, you know, LGBTI people continue to experience stigma, discrimination, violence, and taking away the extent of freedom of association, expression, and of being themselves, and which then results to seeing that LGBTI persons will then lead a life of secrecy. ANC has committed to champion equality, justice, including intersections that are enshrined in the Constitution, which marries very predominantly the Freedom Charter, the African Charter, and the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. It's quite important to realize that or recognize the injustice and inequality that did not start now, but have started long time ago. In South Africa, we have a history of prejudice based on the persons of skin color, based on the person of gender inequality, but also now our history is also matched with homophobia, transphobia in this case. These injustices, Comrade DSG, continue to put LGBTI and vulnerable and very marginalized population at the center. This event is taking place during the Youth Month, where we know revolutions is maintained by young generation. Adding to this is the Pride Month that we recognize this most important event, where we recognize the lived reality of many LGBTI people who continue to be bullied, forced out of school, and rejected by families. Whereas the experiences of many LGBTI person, one, I want to highlight the experiences of intersex person who are subjected to surgeries that they never needed or wanted as a child or when their parents give birth. These injustices continue to adulthood when LGBTI people are faced with discrimination, violence when looking for homes, shelter, or even walking down the road, when looking for job opportunities at workplace or even within the families. We know that South Africa is amongst many countries that is celebrated across the world, one with its constitution, but also one with the great leadership of the African National Congress. But what is important, South Africa has to voice out some of the challenges across the world. 68 countries still criminalize same-sex relation. And amongst 68 countries, 31 are in Africa. And we are joining to celebrate Gabon, where 2 days ago it has decriminalized homosexual act. Many of our government in Africa continue to abuse power and fails to protect its citizens. And it's quite important to recognize that abuse of power and failing to protect citizens based on the fact that there's what we call state-sponsored homophobia. South Africa, we are quite fortunate because we are safeguarded by the Bill of Rights, and that enshrines the very same freedom that we are talking about. We really have to recognize what is happening amongst us. But what is quite important, DSG, ANC should not gamble with its own obligation and commitment it has put in place, where people have fought to ensure this very same freedom, and ANC need to make sure that we do not run a risk of potential reversing of this very same gains of creating a just society. We need to address the politics of oppressions where we do not neglect intersectional lens. We need to create safe environment that promotes and ensure inclusive communities that understand and respect diversity, where we speak about what is happening in school, what is happening in society. We do not really have to ignore the fact that LGBTI persons are only spoken about when we speak about violence. It is not acceptable that this gamble, when it comes to socio-economic level, LGBTI excluded. When it comes to political level, LGBTI excluded. We need to really also, as ANC, ensure that we address the deep-rooted patriarchal and misogynistic trends that exist. Shouldn't the ANC be worried that it is potentially to fail women, children, and LGBTI by virtue of not taking quick steps to addressing violence against women and against communities? Just to wrap up, DSG, I think it's quite important that ANC should take a very sharp point of creating a non-tolerable homophobic and transphobic elements within the ANC. Thank you.
Comrade Steve, thank you very much. I'd like now to call upon Comrade Vuyokazi Zingu, who represents the people with disabilities.
Ma?
Hello.
Hello?
We have you.
Hello?
Okay, I think we can continue.
Igama lami nguVuyokazi Nguqu. Ngizothetha ngokukhubazeka kwethu. I-challenge esizifumanayo. challenge esizifumanayo thina asikwazi ufikelela ezibhankini ngoba kaloku thina sibafitshane noba sesiye kwa-checkers sometimes i-speed point ziba high zingakwazi uphuma so akho safe uba unikeze ngepini yakho. Mna ndifili safe ka ndinikeza ngepini yam. I-height yam ngu-102 ndilingana nomntana ona-3 to 4 but iminyaka yam i-33. So ke ngobenza kucela umongameli esi sikhalo esi ndisicelayo se-ATMs and ke ngoku naseziteksini andikwazi umisa iteksi funeka ndicela umntu ohamba ngendlela and seyimisile iteksi ithatha ixesha ndithatha ixesha ukhwela abahlali bengxamile bona. Xa ndisiya eshophu ngoku njengoba i-lockdown abafuni ndingene namntu kodwa kule height yam andikwazi ukrosala. So bendicela upresident asive isikhalo sam umramaram. Thank you very much.
Vuyokazi, thank you very much for bringing to the fore the physical impediments that prevent you from actually living your life to the fullest. I think that's very important and very profound. Comrades, I would like now to call upon Comrade Khalid Sayed from the Youth League in the Western Cape. Khalid?
Thank you very much, Comrade DSG, and my greetings to the leadership. Comrades, at a time when young people across the globe and here in South Africa are at the forefront of fighting racism and COVID-19, we reflect as young people on the only clause in the Freedom Charter that explicitly mentions the name youth. And that is the clause to do with education. The aim of education, says the Freedom Charter, shall be to teach the youth to love their people and their culture, to honor humanity, liberty, and peace. In the past 26 years, our ANC-led government has done much to ensure access to education. For example, today, 90% of our people can read and write, thanks to the African National Congress. 90% of our public schools are no-fee schools, while our learners are benefiting from the school feeding programs and subsidized transport. The number of learners who pass matric has also increased from 50% before 94 to around 78% today, and the list can go on, comrades. But so much has been done indeed to ensure that our young people have got access to education. But we need to emphasize here that, and particularly coming from a space in the Western Cape, where I'm working in the space of education, more still needs to be done to ensure that we've got access to quality education. Yet the Freedom Charter speaks not so much of access to education, than it speaks to access to quality education. It emphasizes the aim of education rather than access to education purely. Therefore, when we consider the racism that continues to permeate some of our schools and universities, when we note the gross inequalities that still persist in our schools, as is being shown up now during the COVID-19 pandemic, with some not even having access to decent sanitation or running water, never mind swimming pools or tennis courts for young people to enjoy themselves. When we continue to acknowledge that many learners, especially in rural areas, have to travel long distances to get to school, when we admit that our schools continue to fall prey to gang violence, vandalism, and sexual predators, when we recognize that quality education is often absent in our communities and to learners who need it most, those trapped in poverty, and when we tend to point out that our education system at times seems not to prepare young people with necessary tools to be job creators, but rather to be job seekers, that is when we will start to realize that much is still dependent on our generation to take up the baton from our heroes and heroines of 1955 and 1976, to ensure that future generations have access to quality education, such as the Fees Must Fall generation of Comrade Fasia and others. We must ensure, comrades, that our curricula at both schools and universities inculcate in our young people a spirit of love to be Black. Black is beautiful, as the Black consciousness generation of 1976 reminded us. An appreciation of all our cultures of South Africans, as South Africans, Black and white, and to honor humanity, liberty, and peace by starting to work towards an end to gender-based violence in South Africa. And my message to fellow young people who are watching and listening is that these are our challenges and the historical duty of our generation. And if you as a young person have this dream, then, and also wants to be active in achieving the goal of quality education, then if you are at high school, advice is to join COSAS. If you're at university, join SASCO. If you share in the vision of the African National Congress and the South African Communist Party, then join their youth structures, the Youth League and the Young Communist League. Here we will find comrades. Here we will work together as activists in building a South Africa as envisioned by the Freedom Charter. Amandla.
Way too. Thank you very much, Khalid. Zuleika Patel is back, and I'd like her to please take the podium. Zuleika. Okay. Zuleika, are you back?
Yes, I'm back, comrade.
Thank you. Please take the podium.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so what I'd like to say regarding the point of education is that the doors of learning and culture shall be open, but the reality of that is that the doors of learning and culture are shut in the Black child's face by institutionalized and systemic racism. And we see that through the fact that its systemic racism runs as deep as the fact that rural schools and township schools, which were schools previously set aside for Black children, continue to be heavily under-resourced and marginalized and excluded from any and all conversations. And the untold stories of the Black child in schools where textbooks don't arrive on time are silenced. And the stories of children who gain access into going to elite schools, former Model C schools, former white-only schools. Our culture is shut. The door of culture for us in those schools is shut in our faces by institutionalized racism. Because in 2016, we protested and led a revolution whereby we wanted to bring to the forefront the issues of the Black child in Model C schools, whereby our culture is, the doors of culture are shut in our face, whereby we have no access to learning our African mother tongues, and further discriminatory hair policies which work against our hair, as well as further the fact that many of their code of conduct seek to exclude the Black child and seek to work against the Black child. And now what I want to propose is that we form a schools charter, not necessarily as a solution, but as a tool to propel us in the right direction in restructuring the schooling system and dismantling all colonized traditions to ensure that the doors of learning are opened to the Black child and the doors of culture are open to the Black child in heavily white spaces.
Much, Zuleika. And you've made quite an important proposal. I hope we can take it forward. I'd like now to call upon Dr. Khumalo, football legend, to make his remarks.
And it's his birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday, Dr. Khumalo. Happy birthday to you.
Hey.
Dr. Khumalo? There you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you very much for thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And also, thank you very much for the opportunity A very special day. It's my birthday, and also the adoption of the Freedom Charter was on this day. So that means special things happen on this day. And I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the Chair, and all the speakers and the protocol observed. Personally, I just want to thank the ANC for job well done in terms of giving us the opportunity in sports, all sporting codes in South Africa. Through the adoption of Freedom Charter, we managed to have a constitution in South Africa. And there were so many doors that were unlocked politically. And some of us were so naive and we weren't clued up what was happening when we were still growing up in the dusty streets of Soweto. But through perseverance and understanding in terms of following what was going on through the townships, we never failed ourselves in terms of doing wrong things, but we kept on going to school with perseverance in going to playing soccer. And fortunately enough, God blessed us with a talent that saw us playing against the rest of the world, which was not going to be the case if the Human Freedom Association was not out there to make sure that we South African well-talented individuals would get an opportunity to play against the rest of the world. Because sports was banned, we couldn't test our skills against our brothers in Africa, in Europe, in China, wherever. But through ANC, we managed to unlock those unfortunate situations, and it unveiled an opportunity whereby, as I'm seated, as I'm talking to you, I'm very proud to be saying I've been a soldier through ANC, through the government, and I represented the country very well with flying colors, because we wouldn't have achieved to win the Africa Cup of Nations in 1996, whereas the rest of the world was against South Africa, talking about crime, talking about political situations. But we came out emerging in terms of showing what this country is all about. It's all about Ubuntu, and we are a winning nation. And we proved it in 1996. We proved it in 1995 with the rugby team winning it in 95 at the Ellis Park Stadium. And also for the first time in our shows, it has never happened in Africa for a country only to be readmitted to FIFA only 4 years. And there we were, 92, we were readmitted back to FIFA. 98, we were now playing against the rest of the world at the World Cup in France. Having said that, I would like to believe that ex-players, current players, we're so proud, and we want to say through ANC and all the political associated people, we just want to thank you, and we just want to say, let sport be the key factor in terms of taking our kids to another level. We've gone through that. We cannot afford to be a nation without sports. Through sports, we unlock a lot of barriers that we as human beings, we cannot. And through sports, we can teach our kids the behavioral ways of doing things. Because personally, I grew up in a dusty city in Soweto with no resources. But today, we're talking a different language because there are resources, but there's no engagement in terms of father-son, mother-son, or daughter through sports. Hence, probably that's a reason why certain individuals opt to do negative things. I would like to pledge with the government, allow us ex-soccer players to be part of this journey that will allow our young kids who are still wet behind the ears for us to share how does it feel, or how do we have to go about in terms of making sure that through sports they can achieve their goals. Yes, it goes hand in hand, sports and education, but we cannot afford to let one partner not to be taken care of. So I would like to pledge and ask our government, please engage ex-players because they've been through this road. They know how does it feel. We are here as soldiers of this country. We were given an opportunity. I cannot be celebrated, whereas I cannot produce the next Khumalo. So through this, I would like to say, please, President, please, the government, allow us the opportunity like the rest of the world is doing. We are not being recognized. We are not being given an opportunity. Let people who walk that road, on that road, be the ones that teach the youngsters the good things. Believe it or not, you'll come back to me 10 years and you'll be saying, I told you the truth and I told you the right things. People knows how does it feel, not part of the sporting community. I thank you.
Dr. Khumalo, thank you very much for a very uplifting message, and certainly a message that I hope we will take very seriously. I'm getting the point that you're offering yourself to assist with the development of young people, and I don't think anybody is going to say no thank you to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would now like to go back to the young women's desk, if they're ready, to please speak. Young women's desk.
Thank you. Let's apologize also for the confusion. As the Young Women's Desk, we would want to raise, I think, the first point in relation to the clause that speaks to the rights to human life. As the Women's League has pronounced over and over in relation to chemical castration, the response and the reaction from society has been that a more nervous one, to say that infringes on the basic human rights of human beings generally. You then fast forward and look at the numerous cases that have taken place where young women's life have of women in relation to them being able to organize, then being able to go to church, then being able to mobilize. And since we are able to, with the growing number of women who have been able to protest, who are in court, unfortunately, the human right of women to life is one wherein we have not made progress. In fact, we've regressed as society. And there's been a number of submissions that have been made, and I think we would want to reiterate some. The first is, I think, an effort which can be taken by Parliament, which is to introduce a private member bill that would ensure that the responsibility is placed on perpetrators to prove their innocence in cases where there has been reports of rape, as opposed to it being the responsibility of women. Women are burdened with the responsibility not only of preserving their dignity once they are raped, but also having to defend themselves in the court of law, which are not always progressive and helpful towards women. The second, I think, is a more important one, is in relation to introducing a femicide act that would govern the prosecution of gender-based crime, because we see it regularly where cases are dropped. Various courts, particularly regional courts, where women, it's either cases are dropped or cases are postponed on a regular basis, wherein women are left with, particularly families that have lost their loved ones, are left with a hole where they're not able to get justice. I think this is very crucial. Particularly, our next point is in relation to the economic rights of women. Women are at the backbone in relation to providing for their homes, particularly during this time of the pandemic. We've seen women who have been largely affected. These are women who are predominantly in the domestic sector, women who are farmers, women who are hairdressers and so forth, who've been generally affected. And the responsibility must be to ensure and secure the employment and the empowerment of women, particularly also in ensuring equal pay for women and men, equal pay in positions, as well as equal opportunity for women to be employed in senior positions. Okay, thank you very much.
Very much, and thank you for quite a profound input. And I'm glad we left you towards the end, because your message will remain with us for a while. In this section of the program, our last respondent is Dr. Oscar van Heerden from the Mpumalanga Institute. And unfortunately, we won't have time for anyone else. Do apologize. We have a 4 o'clock deadline. So we'll move on to Dr. van Heerden.
Thanks, DSG. It's the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection.
Oh, my apologies.
No problem. Just very briefly, Chair, I want to make a few points. One, it has been 296 years of colonialism, 46 years of apartheid, and only 26 years of democracy. And so I think it's important that the Freedom Charter is a charter that is in response to that legacy of colonialism and apartheid. And so I do think that we must not put ourselves under enormous pressure to try and deliver on the Freedom Charter clauses within a too short time, because we are trying to redress a very long history of colonialism and apartheid. So we must set ourselves realistic targets over the next few years to try and realize the clauses. Secondly, I think that in as much as the Freedom Charter starts with South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, I do think as the ANC, we have not spent sufficient time actively to deal with issues of race and identity politics within the country. We are seen to be too reactive when it comes to racism within society. And I think the ANC should really be in the forefront to lead, actively engaging on the question of race and identity politics, as we can see our young people trying to grapple with some of these issues today. I also want to say, DSG, that of course we are a broad church as the ANC, and so we don't always have to agree with each other. We must be critical, and we must disagree where we can. And so even though the input from Comrade Rasool on the national question is an important one, and indeed the issue between the national question and the colored question, but I think as the ANC, it's time we do put on record a discussion on the Khoi and the San people who feel that the very terminology, black in general and Africans in particular, is actually excluding them as a group within South Africa. And I think it's time we do engage on that issue. On higher education or education generally, I agree that quality is an important thing. We need to look at quality within the education, but we do need to ask the question, if we say free education, free for who? Because if 100 learners enter grade 1, 12 of those learners are the ones that then make it to university, and 4 of those 12 are from no-fee schools. The other 8 are from fees-paying schools. And so if we say free education, I would argue that it should be free for those 4 students who are from poor and working class communities, and not necessarily for everyone. And then finally, DSG, there is a report 2 years ago, the Institute for Race Relations produced a report on state of the nation. And I think it's a good measure to gauge and to measure ourselves against in terms of how we've progressed with satisfying the Freedom Charter clauses. And I raise the IRR because in recent times they have not been our friends. And so that report is is surely should be seen as independent and unbiased. And it's actually a very good report. It shows that as the governing party, we have done very well in actually progressing within our democracy and providing for the poorest of the poor. And finally, Chair, I want to say that we are not doing too badly. We should pat ourselves on the back as the ANC, 26 years down the line. And in fact, we have produced 5 of the clauses within the 10 of the Freedom Charter. We can tick and say done unconditionally. And those are equal before the law, the people shall govern, and many others. The other 5 is an ongoing thing. It is not something that you will ever be able to say we've attained the end of it. And so as the ANC, I think this has been a very interesting and a very good conversation. And we should take comfort in the fact that I think we are very well on the way to providing for the poorest of the poor within South Africa. Thank you, DSG.
Thank you very much, Comrade Oscar. We've come to the end of session 1 and session 2. And one can only say that this has been a rich debate. The only pity is that you give people 3 minutes, which is definitely not enough, to discuss quite a fundamental set of issues. We've all heard, and the country's been listening as well. And we've now come to the point where, Comrade President, you've heard the provinces, you've heard some experts, independent voices, you've heard some criticism of the ANC, you've also heard some praise. And it is our considerable honor now to invite you to make a keynote address. Comrade President.
Thank you, Comrade DSG.
Comrade President, you're on mute.
Deputy President and officials of the ANC, officials of the SACP and COSATU, all the other structures of our movement, comrades and friends. I really, truly welcome this opportunity as we commemorate the 67th anniversary of the Freedom Charter. It is also a moment for us to celebrate the existence of our iconic document and the manner in which it was drafted. It is a moment also to go down memory lane, to reflect on this document that changed the trajectory of our country. And it is good that we commemorate the Freedom Charter during our country's Youth Month. The Freedom Charter is the lodestar, and better still, the bedrock and the foundation of South Africa's constitutional democracy. In many ways, it provides a sterling example of how a people acting together were able to craft a clear vision of the South Africa that they wanted. South Africa was an oppressive and inhumane place for the masses of our people. At the time when the Freedom Charter was drafted, the apartheid regime was becoming even more bolder, and it was intensifying its vicious actions to subjugate the people of our country and suppress them as they were struggling and fighting for their liberation and equality. We are pleased that our forebears felt the need and indeed the duty to respond to this oppressive regime. This situation did require that the People's Organization, the African National Congress, should respond decisively, and respond decisively it did. This is what led the ANC at its 42nd conference to make a call for the convening of a Congress of the People, which would, in the words of our late comrade Joe Slovo, allow each South African to say for himself and herself what they desire from life. The ANC, together with its allies in the Congress Alliance, made a simple call. This call was, let the people speak. Very typical of the African National Congress. And I'm delighted that this DNA has remained deeply embedded in the sinew, in the blood, and the body of the African National Congress, where over the 108 years of its existence, it has always felt that the people must speak. And 65 years ago, indeed, the people did speak. This simple call to unify South Africans around a common vision was seen as a great threat by the then illegal regime. They understood with perfect clarity that their message of hate and division would not survive once the people were united against them. Our movement did what it has always done best. It sent out nearly 50,000 volunteers into the townships, into the villages across the country to collect the demands of the people in the face of great danger. Now, I'm saying this advisedly so that we all remember the DNA of our movement and where our movement comes from. Thousands of our people gathered in Kliptown on Sunday, the 26th August 1955, and despite relentless harassment and violence from the state machinery, this Congress of the People adopted the Freedom Charter. Now, History Online says it so succinctly, and it says that the campaign for the Congress of the People and the Freedom Charter transformed what was essentially an urban-based movement into a fully fledged national movement. Organizational advances were made in the rural areas as a result of volunteers going around the country collecting demands and making invaluable political contact with people in the rural areas and interacting with traditional leaders, religious leaders, the intelligentsia, and ordinary people, traders and farmers and what have you. Precisely what we continue to do today. We're the only movement that has a wall-to-wall existence and presence throughout the country. The campaign also revived Congress branches in the urban areas that had been weakened after the aftermath of the Defiance campaign. The campaign led to the establishment of numerous local branches as well. And the campaign also introduced within the liberation movement a degree of ideological uniformity and cohesion that did not exist previously. It also succeeded in minimizing ideological feuding and rivalry among members of the Congress. And it's important we should reflect on this. It is during campaigns of whatever nature, and this one was the most iconic campaign ever embarked upon in the history of our country. That it is when we campaign that we are able to unify our movement, to have ideological clarity, and to have greater focus. The type of focus that we also need right now as we are fighting against COVID-19. The Freedom Charter gave greater content and meaning to abstract goals such as freedom, national liberation, and self-determination of the African masses. It gave concrete detail and substance to the slogan, freedom in our lifetime, by articulating what that freedom would mean in practical terms in various spheres of South African life. The Charter provided a clear and concise set of policies. It set out clear aims and objectives and principles of the Congress Alliance. And it also served as a vision of a post-apartheid South Africa, which was to be used as a mobilizing and organizing weapon in the struggle for democracy. And did it do so? It did. The Freedom Charter, from the day it was adopted, became the rallying call throughout the country as each one of us got involved in the struggle, remembered what had been enshrined in the Freedom Charter. The most remarkable feature of this campaign was that it attempted to do what had never been done before in the history of South Africa. It allowed ordinary people, irrespective of race, language, sex, religion, place of origin, class, educational standard, personal beliefs, values, and organizational affiliation, to speak about simple things such as their hopes and their dreams of the future. The adoption of the Freedom Charter by the Congress of the People and subsequently by each component of the Congress Alliance signified a major break with the past traditions of the South African struggle. This was no longer a civil rights movement seeking to be accommodated in the existing socio-economic and political structures of society. It called for a fundamental restructuring of all aspects of South African society and life. The Congress of the People had placed the question of social transformation squarely on the agenda of the liberation movement in South Africa. Now, there came into being a national liberation movement. The president of the ANC at the time, Chief Albert Luthuli, described the Congress of the People by saying, "Why will this assembly be significant and unique?" he asked. Its size, he said, I hope, will make it unique, but above all, its multiracial nature and its noble objectives will make it unique because it will be the first time in the history of our multiracial nation that is people from all walks of life will meet as equals, irrespective of race, color, creed, to formulate a freedom charter for all the people in the country. Close quotes. The editorial of the New Age of the 30th June 1955 characterized the Congress of the People as the most spectacular and moving demonstration this country had ever seen. And through it, the people had given proof that they had the ability and the power to triumph over obstacles and win the future of their dreams. Our stalwart Comrade Walter Sisulu Sitwalandwe shared the view of many that the Congress of the People was the most highly organized campaign the movement had ever undertaken. It had, he said, sealed the Congress alliance as a formidable force and had produced and consolidated it around a common political program that would survive the test of time. And as expected, the apartheid regime instructed its security apparatus to ensure that the Congress of the People did not take place. They held up buses, arrested those who did not have passes, they jailed them. But even as they confiscated documents, our people, our forebears, adopted the Freedom Charter by shouts of acclaim and ululations. The apartheid regime had failed. A people united in their determination to craft their own vision of the South Africa they wanted succeeded in gathering messages, notes, some of which were written on toilet paper, on scraps of paper, on leather. They had succeeded in expressing their views. Drafters such as Z.K. Matthews, Rusty Bernstein, and many others had compiled all these inputs. The demands of the Freedom Charter are breathtaking in their commitment to equality, justice, and freedom. And comrades, truth be told, there is no document that is like the Freedom Charter in the world. Yes, one can compare it with the Universal Declaration of Rights, of Human Rights, but the Freedom Charter is unique, and I know of no document that has been drafted in the same way as the Freedom Charter. So today, we celebrate this iconic document, and I've related all this so that we can know the legacy that we have. We should also know what we have inherited. We should also know that as we now execute the task of implementing the Freedom Charter, we stand on the shoulders of the giants who have preceded us, who struggled to have this document drafted as they did. The Freedom Charter is clear that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. This entrenched commitment to non-racialism should permeate through the very fabric of South African society. It is a commitment that was made by our forebears, and we must live up to it. Unfortunately, South Africa and the world are seeing a rise in tearing down this very important aspiration that was set out by our forebears in the Freedom Charter. As we see a rise in racism, discrimination that's based on ethnicity, and narrow nationalism. It is for this reason that the ANC and the Alliance has embarked on a campaign against racism. And I applaud our structures of our alliance and our leaders and members for having taken up the cudgels against racism. We must embark on concerted campaigns to root out racism across our country and indeed across the world. We must continue to work with progressive forces on our continent and the globe to stamp out racism, intolerance of whatever nature, even intolerance against what is clearly set out in our Constitution, against any form of sexual orientation that people want to embark on. At this point in time, our country faces enormous challenges. We are in the midst of a global pandemic unlike anything the world has ever seen in more than 100 years. Our already underperforming economy has contracted further because of the impact of the pandemic. Lastly, there is another pandemic that is raging in our country. There is a war that the men of South Africa have declared against the women of our country. The women of our country. Gender-based violence and femicide are twin scourges that we need to eradicate. All these challenges require us to call on the determination and the resilience of our forebears in the way they approached the challenge of apartheid repression as they drafted the Freedom Charter in the face of danger and death that faced them at the time. This time requires us to again unite and work to put in place the South Africa that we want. The Freedom Charter is explicit in its call that the people shall share in the wealth of our country. A number of comrades have already spoken on this matter. It is undeniable that the wealth of this country remains largely in the hands of a predominantly white and male minority. This must change. The structure of our economy continues to exclude the overwhelming numbers of our people, the poor and the black majority. Our movement, government, and all social partners must work together to bring about radical transformation of the economy and achieve economic inclusion. And this COVID moment gives us that opportunity, which we must grasp. For out of this crisis, there is opportunity. The flip side of a crisis is opportunity, and all we have to do is to turn the coin around and look at the opportunity that the crisis is ushering in. The program of economic restructuring must be anchored on an agreed vision of a more just and equitable economy that works for all. We will have to confront the reality that there will be significant and disastrous job losses as a result of COVID-19. Our plans will have to ensure that there is work and security as set out in the Freedom Charter. This is a process that will take time. We plan to embark on major job creation interventions such as huge infrastructure projects. And the infrastructure projects that we foresee are going to be countrywide, and they will touch all the provinces of our country, and we see them as catalytic projects. We recently held a symposium where we brought together various entities, both local and international, to come and invest. The office that we have established in the presidency has now been able to craft projects, to make them bankable, to make them shovel ready. And we are now, during this COVID period, going to be ready to ensure that the lost jobs that will be lost, we will regain some as we begin to unfold the various infrastructure projects. Why are we doing this? The growth of an economy often revolves around infrastructure, and of course manufacturing and a number of other sectors. We are going to lay emphasis on infrastructure and other sectors, including new sectors of our economy. The COVID moment gives us that chance to craft and create new sectors and to be able to mobilize resources, to crowd in those with money, both local and offshore, so that we can have a greater deal of focus on the economic growth trajectory that we must embark upon. So we will use the infrastructure as a launch pad to grow our economy. The Freedom Charter demands of us to ensure that the land shall be shared amongst those who work it. This talks to the systematic dispossession of land, which remains one of the greatest injustices suffered by black people in the history of our country. We are addressing this heinous crime against our people. The mandate of the 54th National Conference on the question of returning land to the people of our country is clear, and it was right, and it will be implemented. Our program of returning land to the people is going to gain more and more momentum, as we have already started. We have already started with the process of returning land, but in the end, we are going to be insisting that the process that we have started in Parliament should be finalized so that there should be greater clarity under which conditions the expropriation of land without compensation will take place, so that we can return the land to the people of our country. There is significant scope to increase manufacturing and job creation in the agricultural sector throughout the length and the breadth of our country. The Freedom Charter calls on us to ensure that there shall be houses, security, and comfort. COVID-19 pandemic has revealed more starkly that too many South Africans do not have adequate houses. As part of our infrastructure build program, we will accelerate our interventions to build more sustainable human settlements and assist South Africans to obtain housing. This is an overriding objective that we must achieve. We must also ensure that as we proceed with this, we address the challenges that our people continue to face when it comes, for instance, young people especially, to education. The right to education needs to be properly fulfilled. Yes, the young people took to the streets and demanded that there should be a right to education. And we've done a great deal in assisting children from poor families and working class families with funding, and the access that our children have now had in education is quite enormous. We are on the way to fulfilling the dream that was articulated by our forebears in the Freedom Charter. The Freedom Charter is clear that we should also proceed with greater effect to make sure that the governance of our country is put right. We must also make sure that at local government level, the people do govern indeed, and they do participate in the governance of their local areas. Service delivery is part of the right that our people want to see fulfilled, that the people shall govern, and that their needs and aspirations should also be met at the local level with service delivery. This is something that we should not put aside and forget. We should also make sure that as we proceed to do this, we realize the importance that local government plays in uplifting the lives of our people. Apartheid caused a lot of devastation, even in the areas where our people live. So therefore, that is exactly where we must uplift our people so that they have proper sanitation, they have proper water, they have proper housing, they have proper roads. These are some of the minute issues that we sometimes lose sight of when we talk about the Freedom Charter. The Freedom Charter spoke about our people having a better life, and our government has committed itself to precisely this. Today, we also talk about the war that has been declared on the women of our country. Freedom Charter spoke about people living in comfort and security. It is a travesty that women and children in our country feel unsafe, and they feel that, and the reality they face is that they are being abused, they are being raped, and they are being killed. The government has enacted many laws and is strengthening the criminal justice system to more effectively deal with gender-based violence. Effective laws and more policing will not be enough on their own. We need all of society to work together to effectively deal with gender-based violence and all other social ills. All of society needs to work together to combat gender-based violence and femicide by confronting patriarchal norms and attitudes and acting at all times in a manner that respects the rights and the lives of women. This is an important task that as leaders of the Alliance we must lead on. We need to engage our structures in campaigns to change the minds of our citizens and stamp out the behavior that treat women as inferior and as property. Silence about gender-based violence is one of the greatest contributing and enabling factors to this crime. No longer should we be silent. We must call out perpetrators without fear or favor. We further need to focus on the economic and social empowerment of women, actively working to ensure women have a greater stake in the economy of our country. We should also be the ones, as the Alliance, to be championing the rights of people who live with disabilities. We should also be the ones in the Alliance to champion the rights of people who are part of the LGBTQI community. We are the ones who lead society. Just as the Congress Alliance in the 50s led society by crafting the Freedom Charter, it is also the mandate that we have to lead society, to ensure that all these areas of intolerance, and including the abuse of women, are brought to an end. In conclusion, the brave men and women who worked together to draft the Freedom Charter did so in the face of enormous and tremendous challenges. We now face our own enormous challenges. We need to unite as South Africans, but we also firstly need to unite as the Alliance and draw on the indomitable spirit and example of our forebears. South Africans have worked together to overcome many great difficulties, and they worked together led by the Congress movement. This Congress movement must now lead our country as we proceed out of COVID-19. For COVID-19 imposes a number of duties on us. And the very first one is to make sure that we arrest the spread of the virus and spread the message to all our people to ensure that we wear our masks, we have social distancing, and it is through these that we will be able to arrest the spread of the virus. As we speak now, we continue to move more and more towards the peak. And we can turn things around, and it is behoven on this movement, on the Alliance, to deal with this crisis and also to look out for the opportunities on the flip side of this crisis so that our country can move forward. Ahead of us lie a lot of tasks. I believe that, like the men and women who drafted the Freedom Charter and created a vision for our country, we will be men and women enough and be able to craft a clear vision that will lead us out of this crisis and get us into the opportunities we need to get into, as our forebears did when they confronted the apartheid state and drafted the Freedom Charter, which has given us the democracy that we have today. I thank you.
Can
I go home now?
All the services are in-house. There's no outsourcing of everything that you have done. We are learning, and very soon we will perfect, and we apologize to anyone who is not able to accommodate in the Zoom. But thank you very much. Long live the spirit of those who gathered in Kliptown this year, 65 years ago. Long live the unity of the Alliance. Long live the unity of the people of South Africa. Sigelele Africa. Thank you, Comrade President. Thank you, National Chair. Thank you, SG. Thank you very much, DSG. And we know that our Treasurer General is watching us from home, where he has just, we have all been with him, laying his dear mother to rest. Amandla.
Thank you very much.